Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
The Maryland coast may soon be lined with offshore wind turbines in the state's effort to develop renewable energy. The federal government is currently holding public hearings on the projects. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. But this is only one piece of the changing landscape in efforts to deal with climate change. And there has been resistance from the business community as well as political opposition to developing clean energy. Former journalist Bob Keefe is now executive director of E2, or Environmental Entrepreneurs, and he says some of that attitude may be changing. Keefe has written a new book entitled Climatenomics, Washington, Wall Street, and the Economic Battle to Save Our Planet. And we have him on the phone this morning. Welcome to the program.
Don, it's so good to be with you.
So tell me then a little bit about this change just overall that you're seeing in how businesses are now beginning at least to approach renewable energy and climate change.
Well, the good news, Don, is that thanks to some of the technological advancements that we've seen in recent years, we're starting to at least have the tools to do a lot more to address climate change. And when I say that, I mean, for instance, solar and wind now is the cheapest power there is in just about every part of the country. Every automaker, as we now know, is shifting to electric vehicles, in part because they're cheaper to operate in the long run, and because we're all sick and tired of paying $5, $6, $7 a gallon for gasoline. And then there's simple energy efficiency improvements, Don, that we've all seen over the years. Think about lighting. LED lighting, for instance, uses 90% less energy than the old incandescent bulbs that we were all shackled to, essentially, for the past century. Things like high-efficiency HVAC systems, high-efficiency heat pump water heaters, other improvements in energy efficiency are now poised to save homeowners with every single monthly power bill. What we now need to do is make sure that more of these things are more affordable and more available to more Americans, and that's where congressional policy comes in.
One of the things I've noticed is that, as you mentioned a moment ago, the automobile industry is certainly pushing toward the electric car. Some are saying that they're going to only produce electric cars. We'll see about that. But how quickly can the infrastructure be put in place in terms of providing the electricity for these vehicles? Does it resemble anything like we saw, for instance, with the introduction of gasoline and gas-powered automobiles? I mean, and it does seem like that's a real tall order.
It is a tall order. We need to get the infrastructure in place. The good thing is that that's happening now. It started happening when Congress and President Biden passed the infrastructure bill that pumped billions of dollars into expanding our EV charging network. I was just talking yesterday to one of our members of E2, my organization, who's in the charging business, who just got an order for something like 750 chargers to be installed in Southern California in the next couple of months, and she's going to be able to do that. So we're moving that way. We need to be moving faster based on what's happening with the climate and what we've all been living through.
Well, because one of the things that strikes me is that, if I go to my gas station, I can put some gas in my car and be filled up within a matter of minutes. It seems to me that we do have an issue in terms of trying to make sure that we have enough electricity, say, in our car that may travel maybe 300 or 400 miles, but nonetheless, particularly for long distance, it becomes problematic. I mean, are we anywhere near solving that problem?
Well, the Biden administration just came out with a policy as we roll out more of these chargers that companies that get federal funding to do this need to put them every 50 or so miles, I believe, on the highways. So we're going to get there. Is it going to be overnight? No, but we're coming close. And as far as the charging times, there's technology now that is available. I was just talking last night with a venture capitalist. I'm up in Seattle today, and he was investing in a company that says it has the technology now to be able to charge your vehicle in 15 minutes or less. It almost takes that long to pump gas now. So technology always surprises us, or it always surprises me sometimes, but we have the technology to make this happen now. We just need to make it happen for more people, more Americans across the country.
So turning to wind power, I mentioned a moment ago at the top of the show that we're looking at perhaps some offshore wind farms, certainly
Right.
off of Maryland, up and down really the Atlantic coast here. There's some opposition to it from some local folks. How important is that element, and why is it that we seem to have developed, at least as you say a moment ago, this ability to maybe get more energy out of those turbines than say we did even say 10 or 15 years ago?
Well, the blades are bigger, the equipment is better. It's just like anything, Don. It's just like the cell phones or the equipment that we're using right now to talk to each other. It improves with technology. You know, before I started running E2 Environmental Entrepreneurs, I spent about 20 years as a journalist, a lot of that time including as a technology journalist. And I can remember sitting with other reporters and in Cupertino, California, Don, with Steve Jobs and Steve telling us, you know, someday you're going to have 1,000 songs in your pocket, and you'll be able to take pictures with your cell phone, like anybody wanted to take a picture with their cell phone or could even imagine taking a picture with their cell phone at that time. I remember sitting in Seattle with Jeff Bezos when Amazon was just selling books and having a hard time doing that, and Bezos telling us that someday you're going to be able to order anything you can find in a grocery store or any store on my website. And we all kind of took our notes and shook our heads in disbelief. But look how quickly that technology has come along, Don. Look how quickly that's shaped our world. Right now, solar, wind, electric vehicles, battery technology is clearly where that technology was 15 years ago or so when I was writing that, covering that news. So I'm a big believer that technology is a huge part of this. The other part is that businesses are deploying this. Right now, just about every major corporation in America is shifting to clean energy. Why? Not because they necessarily care about the planet. Hopefully they do. But it's because it's a bottom line issue. They can save money because solar and wind is the cheapest power available. Delivery companies are shifting to electric vehicles as quickly as they're available as well because they don't want to pay $5, $6 a gallon for gasoline any more than you and I do. So the economics of climate change, if you will, or the economics of climate action in this case, is really driving the growth and really providing some solutions for us to get out of this mess that we've created.
Now, you indicate in your book that it's not just for the private sector alone, that there is that other element, which is government, that's needed in order to push this thing forward. In other words, private enterprise alone is not going to do it. What role do you see in terms of government involvement?
Well, again, every major transition economically that we've had in our country, the government has been involved one way or another. You know, look at electric vehicles. I think it's pretty safe to say that electric vehicles took a major leap forward when Tesla got involved. Well, like them or not, Tesla got started in part because of a DOE, Department of Energy, loan guarantee back in the Obama administration. Look at what happened with electrifying rural America, or under the Roosevelt administration, or the highway system under the Eisenhower administration. Those things all took government intervention, federal innovation to make those things happen. What I see now is that, again, we finally are to the point where the technology is there. The solar panels of today are not the solar panels that Jimmy Carter put on the White House and thought everybody would adopt. They're again, some of the cheapest power available. The electric vehicles of today are not the General Motors EV1 that was kind of a fad in the early 90s. So the technology is there. Again, what government needs, where government comes into play, is making these things more accessible and more available and more affordable to more Americans. And policies like the budget reconciliation bill that's been sitting in the Senate since September would help do that by providing tax credits for clean energy, providing and extending tax credits for electric vehicles, by providing funding to help more people install energy efficiency products in their homes, in their offices, and in our schools, and by investing in research and development into clean energy that will help keep America competitive in the years to come.
What do you say to those who say that the government making these kinds of investments or incentives, as it were, that they're picking winners and losers in the economy, and that there will be a lot of losers and will waste government money?
Well, what I would say is that we can't afford not to do everything we can to address this issue. Look, climate change last year alone, Don, cost the United States $150 billion in damage from climate-related events. Of course, wildfires in the West, so many hurricanes in the East that we ran out of names for them a couple of years ago, flooding, drought in the Midwest that has in turn driven up prices for everything from cornflakes to chicken. In the Delmarva area alone, there's been an average of about $1.2 billion from flooding, from storms, from other climate-related events over the past 5 years. That's according to NOAA, not according to me. Look at the heat wave that just engulfed Delmarva and other parts of the country. We had something like 100 million Americans stuck in record heat, 100 degrees and higher some places. That shuttered schools and businesses, sent electricity costs soaring as people cranked up the air conditioners. In Kansas, I don't know if you saw what happened in Kansas, the third largest cattle state in the country. More than 2,000 head of cattle lay dead on the side of the roads that were killed by extreme heat and humidity. And it's not even summer yet. So at a cost of something like $4 million to those farmers out there. So we have to do something to address the economic costs of climate change that continue to grow. The good news is by investing in climate action, climate solutions, clean energy, we can do that, and we can make our economy stronger, create more jobs, drive innovation and investments in America.
As I mentioned a moment ago, there is opposition, particularly political opposition. I focus on Joe Manchin from West Virginia, but he's just one example in which apparently he rejected some clean electricity program that would reward power plants to switch from fossil fuels to solar, wind, and other clean sources, rejected imposition of fee on emissions for methane, rejected tax credits for consumers who buy electric vehicles produced by union labor. I mean, you seem to be seeing not only him, but others from other states rejecting what you are advocating in terms of government action. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think part of it is they don't realize that climate change is no longer just an environmental issue, Don. It's no longer just a social issue. It's no longer just a health issue. Those things should be important to every elected official in the country. What they need to realize as well is that climate change is now a serious economic issue as well. And it's not an economic issue that's just impacting the Arctic or some faraway Pacific island. It's happening in our backyards. It's happening with the extreme heat that we all just experienced around the country. It's happening with the wildfires that we're seeing increasingly in the West and the hurricanes that we're seeing in the East. You know, in the past 5 years alone, 3 of the most expensive wildfires in our nation's history happened. 4 of the most expensive hurricanes happened. In Texas, we had $200 billion, I believe, from the winter freeze from last year in Texas, of all places. In Iowa, we had $7.5 billion worth of damage from the worst and most expensive thunderstorm event ever happened, the bomb cyclone of a couple of years ago. So politicians, our elected officials, need to wake up and realize that it doesn't matter if they care about polar bears. It doesn't matter if they even believe in science. It doesn't matter if they drive a Prius or a pickup truck. Climate change is battering our economy, and we have to do something about it. And again, by doing something about it, we can actually strengthen our economy.
The other piece of this, of course, is a transition from, say, the fossil fuel consumption to clean energy, and that obviously means jobs. How does one make that transition? I mean, in your book, you talk about lots of jobs being created with clean energy, but you also talking about people having to transition out of the older forms, for instance, coal mines and that kind of thing. The coal miners and the coal industry is just one example. How do you make that transition? And people can't just simply get up and walk to some other state in order to do it. Sometimes they're kind of stuck where they are geographically. How do you deal with that?
That's right. Well, first of all, I think it's important to realize how big this industry is and the potential growth of the industry. When I say that, I mean clean energy generally. For about 10 years now, my organization, E2, has been tracking clean energy job growth around the country. And what we know, and working most recently with the Department of Energy on this, but what we know now, Don, is that there are about 3 million Americans that work in clean energy in every single state of the country. Yes, it's wind and solar workers, but it's also the people that are making our high-efficiency appliances in factories in the Midwest. It's the people building those electric vehicles and those charging stations that we were talking about. In the Delmarva area alone, about 180,000 people work in clean energy. And by the way, it's also energy efficiency workers that are construction workers and others that are putting this stuff in our offices, homes, and schools. Solar and wind right now are the two fastest growing jobs in the country, two of the fastest growing jobs in the country, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that's creating a lot of opportunities. To get to your question, we need to figure out ways to make sure the energy workers of yesterday are the energy workers of tomorrow. And who better to continue the growth of our energy industry than the workers that are in it right now? We need to make sure that these jobs are available in every part of the country, and they're starting to be. Look, for instance, where these electric vehicle manufacturers are building their factories. Yes, there's some in Detroit in the Midwest, but it's also Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, North Carolina. The companies that are going to be creating the electric vehicles that we drive tomorrow are locating, in many cases, in red states and southeast states. The companies that are going to supply those companies are going to follow them, create jobs, drive economic growth, drive investments in those states as well.
One of the things that strikes me is that the state of Wyoming, for instance, has had tremendous employment in terms of oil and gas, with fracking as a major technological innovation, but is also trying to get wind. I mean, there does seem to be some conflicting sentiments there, because I can imagine if I were to tell somebody in Wyoming that we should cut back in some fashion about oil and gas, they would say, no, I've got a job. It's this good stuff,
right,
as opposed to wind.
Well, isn't that crazy? There's a chapter in my book that focuses on what's happening in Wyoming, as a matter of fact. Wyoming, as you rightly put it, is one of the biggest states in the country for fracking, or it traditionally has been. It also right now is home to what will be what's expected to be the biggest wind farm in the nation, the Choke Cherry Sierra Madre development. It's going to generate enough power to power 350,000 homes throughout the West. Now, back in August 2020, as I write in the book, it was an interesting time because in Wyoming they laid down that month. Then they quit operating at the time what was the only remaining working petroleum gas rig in the entire state. At the same time, we had hundreds of workers showing up at the Sweetwater. At the same time as the Sweetwater rig was coming down, 3 hours away, hundreds of workers were going to work on that Choke Cherry Sierra Madre wind farm in Wyoming. So when you were asking how we transition those jobs, a lot of those workers on that wind farm were people that were putting up oil derricks or gas derricks previously.
So in terms of looking to the future, how quickly do you think this will take hold? Because, I mean, one of the things I noticed, there was a UN climate change report, and basically it said that holding warming to just 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit would require nations to collectively reduce their planet warming emissions roughly 43% by 2030. An unlikely outcome, given that current policies are only expected to reduce global emissions by a few percentage points this decade. On the one hand, you point to all this energy, as it were, being put into climate change and climate change technologies. On the other hand, when I look at reports like that, I wonder whether, despite all of it, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't go ahead and try to push this way, that we may wind up losing out in some fashion anyway.
So I think the bottom line is we need to move as fast as we can and to do as much as we can to address the issue of global warming and the economic costs of climate change that come with it. We've got to pass the policy that's been sitting in the Senate since last year, for starters. But there's other things that we can do as well. Right now, there are a lot of states that, while the federal government continues to sit on its hands, are moving forward on 100% clean energy. That's going to be huge. There are other things that the Biden administration is doing right now that's going to have a major impact as well. Look at procurement, for instance. The federal government is the biggest buyer of stuff there is, including fuel for aircraft, for all the vehicles it uses. It's one of the biggest buyers of vehicles in the world. It's one of the biggest operators of office space in the world as well. Now, the president has said he wants those office buildings to be powered by clean energy. He wants the government fleets to shift to electric vehicles. And he wants cleaner fuels to fly our aircraft, jets, and everything else that we use fuel for. If we can get the federal government to do that, that's going to not only create a significant economic boost right now and a significant reduction in carbon emissions, but it's also going to spur the market. It's going to send a signal to the rest of the market that that businesses, local governments, and others can follow. And again, I look back to how quickly technology changed our lives and everything from cell phones to the internet. It can happen quickly, but we have to have federal action to make sure that we can ensure that all Americans have access to cleaner energy and cleaner vehicles.
How do you compare, say, for instance, the United States with, say, other countries, particularly in Europe, obviously, which is facing already their own oil issues with the Ukraine, but that,
Right.
because I know, for instance, even conservative parties in Europe, the Tories and so on, they all recognize that climate change is here and that they need to do something about it, and how do you get from here to there? We do seem to have at least certain politicians who seem to be pushing back on that. How do you compare how we're doing in terms of, say, a place like Europe?
Well, in terms of climate policy, we're not doing very well right now, frankly. Recently, Yale University came out with a study that ranked where countries are on climate action. Now, 6-7 years ago, the United States was number 15 on that list. We had 4 years where we had a president that thought that climate change was a hoax and tried to shift us back to coal to power our country. We lost a lot of ground. Today we're closer to number 100, actually number 101 on that list of countries that are doing more on climate action. And unfortunately that means we've missed a step economically as well. Other countries are moving forward quicker than the United States on clean energy, and they're reaping the economic benefits that come with that.
Do you think that the crisis that's now being played out with Ukraine and the high prices, certainly of oil, at least during this particular juncture of the conflict, we'll see how it all plays out, is going to have an impact on how quickly other countries or even ourselves try to move to clean energy? Because I know that the countries in Europe, for example, some of them are highly dependent upon Russian oil and gas, others not so much. Do you think that is also going to be changing the equation?
Well, I think it already is. And look, nobody wants to pay more for gasoline, and right now the fact of the matter is most of us drive gas-powered cars. So it makes sense in some ways to figure out how to make it cheaper for us to drive to work, to drive to school, to drive to wherever we need to go. But the fact of the matter is the cheapest way to do that is through an electric vehicle. So I don't think it's a good solution to go back to the bottle when you've already been drunk off of oil for centuries now. We need to figure out ways not to increase our addiction to oil and gas and put us at the mercy of foreign dictators forever, but a way to get off of that. And we can do it by shifting to electric vehicles, better public transportation, things like that.
By the way, I noticed, and I don't think I saw it in your book, a mention of nuclear power. What do you make of that?
Well, nuclear is a significant producer of power around the world. It is in the United States as well. There's two things that we need to figure out with nuclear, though. First is, what do we do with the waste? It's been a problem since we started creating nuclear plants around our country years ago. There's a plant not too far from my house on the California coast that's been shut down for years. It's literally on the rocky edge of the cliff that's filled with nuclear waste from years of operation that we have absolutely no idea what to do with. So there's that. The other thing that we need to figure out with nuclear energy is the cost. Right now, the only nuclear plant that's been built in our country in recent history is in Georgia, the Vogtle plant outside of Savannah. Now, that has cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Several contractors have gone bankrupt trying to build that thing, and it's still not up and running 100% yet. So imagine if we took the money that we invested in a nuclear plant like that, which is hundreds of billions of dollars, and we deployed that in clean energy, or we deployed that in battery storage and things like that around the country. That would be helpful.
Are you optimistic?
I am optimistic. I'm optimistic, Don, because of what I said earlier about the pace of technology. Right now, with solar and wind being the cheapest power available when it comes to utility-scale solar and wind, when we've seen this rush to electric vehicles that nobody was really expecting, and just what we see in energy efficiency and battery storage around the corner, it's very hopeful. It's very promising, but we've got to make sure that we make those things affordable and available to more people as quickly as we can.
Do you think that the political climate slows that down?
Well, I think it absolutely slows it down. Look, we needed to pass that policy. We still need to pass that policy that's in Congress right now. But Congress isn't the only game in town. Lasting legislation is absolutely what we need. Why we can't get it done and why we don't have the will politically to get it done is beyond me. When you see the cost of these climate disasters hitting every state, red, blue, purple, or yellow, when you see the opportunities coming from clean energy in every state around the country right now in terms of jobs and investments, it's beyond me why anybody would make this a political issue. Unfortunately, it has been made a political issue in some ways, but we've got to move past that.
We've been speaking with Bob Keefe. He's now executive director of E2, or Environmental Entrepreneurs, also author of a new book entitled Climatenomics, Washington, Wall Street, and the Economic Battle to Save Our Planet. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this morning.
Don, thank you so much.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.